Well, greetings, everybody. I hope everybody had a nice break there. We're going to start the next session here with Dr. Silvano Colombano. I'd like to do the introduction here. Dr. Silvano Colombano was to have been actually our SCU keynote presenter in 2019. However, he was at the time still employed with NASA. Presenting to a UFO conference about a controversial paper suggesting to all that scientific study of UFO phenomena was actually worthy of serious treatment. They deemed his study to actually be very controversial, and he had to decline his participation. And we're very grateful that upon leaving NASA, he's now joined SCU, and we're just happier and I'll get out to have him on board. Dr. Silvano Colombano received an MA in physics and a PhD in biophysical sciences from the University of Buffalo. He has spent most of his working career at NASA Ames Research Center, first as a researcher in closed ecological life support systems, and later in artificial intelligence and robotics. He began the development work on the Astronaut Science Advisor, ACA, also known as the pie in a box, and managed the project until its deployment on SLS-2 and Space Shuttle SLS or STS-58 in 1993. He has been doing research and development work in the artificial neural networks, genetic algorithms, and fuzzy logic in the Intelligent Systems Division at NASA Ames. He is an author or co-author of over 80 technical publications. He led a group in evolutionary biotronics, comprising projects in evolutionary hardware modular cooperative robotics and artificial life, and organized a workshop on self-sustaining robotic ecologies called Robosphere in 2002, 2004, and 2006. He's been interested in self-deploying robotic space structures. He's worked on systems engineering for the Orion space capsule flight software and a fault management system for the deep space habitat. The last project that he led at NASA, 2019 to 2020, was the development of autonomous medical operations, a machine learning system for providing autonomy in medical care for astronauts during deep space missions. He's now retired, lucky guy, and active in consulting and teaching projects. And are we grateful to have him in his retirement joining us? By the way, he is, again, a member of SCU, and we're glad to have him on board. His title of his presentation, A Cost-Benefit Analysis of UAP Research. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you, Dr. Colombano. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Rich. I'm very grateful to be here and very much impressed, amazed by the quality of the presentations just so far. So I feel quite humbled actually at this point because I'm not a ufologist. So, in some ways, this is a bit of a stretch. But let me see the presentation if it comes up, and I will turn off the video. Is that?
Share your screen.
Share your screen. And I gotta share. Okay, first of all, I got that. I should have done that first. I'm asking if I want to share. That's okay. Okay, fine. Are you seeing it now?
I'm not, no.
I'm not, no. It's not coming up yet?
No.
No. Okay, I got a message that asked me to go to preferences to allow to share.
If you'd like, I can
And,
drive.
if
you'd like, I can
drive.
Yeah, why don't you drive it?
Okay.
I'll try it.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. And everyone should be seeing your presentation now on the screen. Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right. So you just let me know by saying next, and I'll be glad to turn it for you.
Perfect. Okay. Next, please. I want to make a few things very clear about my presentation, and I think I'm going to go to the last bullet first. I just realized that I need to put it in a context. And Rich mentioned a paper that I presented to SETI 2 years ago, and that was simply a claim that a proposal for that they should not have such restrictive assumptions about their research. That was the first step. The second one was actually to present them with an approach that I felt they should take to create a portfolio. I did not want to deny the value of looking for signals and trying to have a direct approach to proving the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence, but I just felt that UFO research should have its place, and the question is, how much of an investment should SETI or some other organization put into it? What would be the value of it compared to other types of more direct kind of searching? So if we get back up to the top here, if we had so many $1 million to spend to prove the existence of technology, alien technology, what would be an effective research portfolio based on cost and probability of success? Where would UFO research fit in? One thing that's very, very important for you, in the context of this particular talk, is that all assumptions, probabilities, and cost estimates are debatable, educated guesses. So please don't. The argument of this is not about the probabilities, what they actually are, but about the process of finding a good portfolio. So all of these probabilities can be, you can put in your own numbers if you want, assuming you like the approach, and come up potentially with different types of results. Ultimately, the result is that, of course, UAP will be a very, very valuable investment. And so I'm kind of preaching to the choir. But the idea, again, is to present with a portfolio approach that could be given to SETI or could be given to other organizations. I did actually give this in a prior, a simpler format, and I did not hear back, so I don't know what. Next, please. So I will talk about basic assumptions about technological levels of probabilities. I'm sorry, technological probability levels, I should say. And how we use the Bayes rule for conditional probabilities. Something else I should add here is that I'm not a statistician. So, but in the process of this work, I realized that Bayes rules had to be used, and I sort of dusted off books and worked it out. But I'd be totally open to somebody coming in to help me if I wanted to make this into a more formal approach. So basically, I broke down the basic initial probabilities of UAP discovery for three scenarios. One is contemporary physics, basically assuming that whatever is happening out there is explainable by contemporary physics. Another scenario needs some extended physics, and I will define these later, and speculative physics. The same process will be used for detection of civilization artifacts, and by that I mean looking. Now we know where the planets are, where there might be some chance of life. We can look there and maybe find signs of civilization artifacts. It can be in the form of gases, or it can be objects that could be around there. People even think of Dyson spheres, or really huge, potentially planetary artifacts. And my point actually with this study was that even if we detect such things, or there will be arguments about it. We'll still wonder if whatever was detected was actually a sign of civilization or some natural phenomenon. So we'd be having exactly the same arguments about those things as we have with UAPs, and it would be probably a lot more costly to go find those artifacts. Not that we shouldn't be doing it. Again, it's a matter of balance. And at the end, I will have scatter plots of cost versus probabilities for different research approaches. One thing I want to mention also is completely unrelated to the talk itself, but I want to mention it. I am a stutterer. I consider myself recovered, and it's not going to be a problem. I'm totally okay. But occasionally there may be some strange pause that may happen, especially if I get very excited. And if that's what happens, it might not happen, but if it does happen, that's what's happening. I'm a stutterer. Next, please. So here are the basic definition of contemporary physics, and what we have now, we know that. Extended will be okay. The things that we pretty much know are going to happen. And there are just an extension maybe within 100 years, 200, but there will be nuclear fission, antimatter, antimatter power, human level AI, etc. So I evaluate, again, if we were to see for UAP being explainable by extended physics, I'd say 30%. I say contemporary physics 60 only because we are enamored of our contemporary physics, and we want to make that to me the most likely. But speculative physics is, of course, space-time control and being able to go as fast as the speed of light and all that. And robotic life, who knows? Next, please. The actual, I put some estimating probabilities, but those actually will depend on we will see now how that works out with Bayesian statistics. So again, we look at these three possibilities, and the technologies that we want to detect. It could be civilization artifacts, celestial sense beacons, traveling colonies, interstellar travel will be UAP that will be needed. And by the way, I had not, the previous talk was about intertemporal travel. I have not even given it, I have not thought about it. So this is not considered in this, how we would prove that. So, but I appreciate that talk, and I certainly that's worth thinking about, but that's not something I considered in this talk. Notice that given current physics, there's a red arrow that go from current physics to UAPs. That's reds, meaning that it will be very unlikely. If we insist on current physics, then UAPs will be very unlikely to be interstellar travel. And so we would say that if we do detect them, it will probably be a false positive. That will be what would come out of the statistics. On the contrary, with speculative physics, for instance, everything is possible. With extended physics, some are more possible than others. So here, as the yellow, green, for extended physics, almost everything is possible at the top, less so for interstellar travel. And yeah, basically those are the ideas. And notice again also that I did not, okay, look at the 60%, 30%, and 10% of the current extended and speculative physics. Those are just, the estimates will actually depend on what we observe, and you will see how that works out with the base. There at the right, we have a prior probability of detection, again, pull out of a hat. I put a 0.6 at the bottom, you see, for UAP. By that I mean, certainly, we could view it as 100% in the sense that we are seeing things. The question is proving that what we're seeing is an indication of extraterrestrial intelligence is something different. So I just throw it at 0.6. Again, I don't want to argue about any of these numbers. You can just put your own. And I put a 0.2 for the detection of artifacts on planets, on distant planets. The other numbers, I put a illustrative bookmark, meaning I didn't even give it any thought. I just put a number down without doing any kind of thinking or analysis about. I just do not know what technology we will need to detect traveling colonies, or that. So I'm again, there are just numbers put in. Next, please. So Bayes' theorem. The formula is on top. Let's go through the elements. PAB, that's the posterior probability. That's the probability of detection given a technology assumption. So given the probability of finding that the UAPs represent extraterrestrial intelligence, given some assumptions about the technology, which will be could be contemporary physics, extended or speculative. PBA is probability of technology given a detection event, meaning given that we're seeing UAP, what's the probability that that will be due to contemporary physics? What is the probability that will be speculative physics? And we'll see how these numbers, of course, are different. Prior probability of detection, that's kind of assuming that we're instruments, and I put that at 0.6 for UAP. And the PB is probability of the technology in our case, given both detection and non-detection. Next, please. So let's go to the example. I'll probably not go through all of these, but just give you the idea of how it works out. So let's look at the base formulation based on only current physics. So the probability of observing UAP, given that only current physics is possible. PBA is probability of current physics, given the observation of UAP. And I put that as very small, very, very small. In other words, if we see UAP, we are seeing the likelihood that they're due to they can be understood by current physics is very small. Probability of observing, I put again at 0.6, explaining that's just pulled out of the air. But I shouldn't have said no observing UAP, but proving that UAP is international to extraterrestrial intelligence. At the marginal likelihood, PB, the probability that is only going to be current physics, whether we observe or do not observe. So the PB is the harder to compute. We have to do the PB that we saw up there. The given current observation is 0.005, very small, times the probability of observing. And are you seeing the arrow here? If I move it around? Have you seen my cursor? No, you're not, probably. Okay. Oh, okay, that's good. You got some cursor there, but I can't maneuver it. Okay. PB, given that we're not observing, and P of not observing will be the 0.5 and 0.4. By that I mean that probability of current physics is very small if we do observe UAPs. It's 50-50 if we don't. If we don't observe it, then there's nothing we can really say about it. So if I plug all those numbers in, I see that the probability, posterior probability of observing UAP, given that only CP is possible, is very, very small, 0.01, which is actually reflects the current attitude based on the belief that only current physics is possible. In other words, if I believe that only current physics is possible, then if I see a UAP, I say it's a false positive. You know, I cannot accept that it is extraterrestrial intelligence. Next, please. Okay, for the extended physics, basically the same process, but now the probability of observing if I observe a UAP, I would at least have extended physics. So the probability of having extended physics is high. Again, the probability of UAP is 0.6. The margin of likelihood for EP is, again, EP is very high if we do observe UAP and 50-50 if we don't. So something like earlier, but now we have we're getting to a 0.73, basically a bit higher, a higher probability of observing UAP given that EP is possible. Next, please. For speculative physics, again, if we observe UAP, the probability of having speculative physics is reasonably high. I put it less than extended only because we still are queasy about allowing for fraction the speed of light and all that kind of stuff. But we can be open about it, of course. And again, the PB at the bottom, the probability of speculative physics is very high if we do observe UAP, but very low if we don't. So if we don't observe it, then we're saying, well, there is no reason to believe that speculative physics is even possible. So that it, with that, we plug in the numbers in, we got a 0.996. Next. Just kind of a sensitivity analysis. If we change the speculative physics from 0.8 to 0.4, making it cutting the need in half for SP, we find that the probability is still reasonably high. In other words, it's not very sensitive as long as we allow it. Next one. Okay, now we go to artifact detection. Okay, that's what probability of observing an artifact I put at 0.2. And again, I less than for observing UAPs because it would be a lot harder, basically, to detect that stuff. And at the bottom, so either if we observe or not observe artifact, there's no effect on the probability of current physics. The point is that we do not need special extended or speculative physics. We just need telescopes and radio telescopes and whatever. So there's nothing that stretches our concept of what we need to do scientifically. So of course, a more rigorous approach would have to consider different types of artifacts, those that are potentially approachable with telescopes, and those that are not. And I would not know what technologies might be needed for those. The posterior probability for that would be 0.2. Next, please. I'm going to be going faster and faster through the examples because we now understand the process essentially, but just have to explain it, give some modest rationale for the numbers, but again, those should be, you can pick your own numbers. That's not the point. Given probability of extended given observation of artifacts, I put it pretty high, meaning again, overall, we might need a little bit more future physics to observe them. So at the bottom, again, the probability of extended physics, if we observe artifacts, pretty high. But if we don't know what to say about it. So let me make it 50-50. And I ended up then with 0.25. Next. Okay, kind of the same reasoning about speculative physics. And so again, probability of speculative physics is pretty high if we observe artifact and very low if we don't. Again, by this is mean that we might observe things like they're extremely technologically still impossible for us. So could be Dyson sphere or something, artifacts that would require ideas from speculative physics. So again, so you can put your own numbers in, and I get a 0.8. Okay, next. So I basically average for all of the three possibilities of contemporary, extended, and speculative. I get a 0.57 for UAPs and 0.42 for artifact detection. Again, and those numbers could be completely different. Next. Okay, now we go into the costs. So we found the 0.42 for artifacts. So on the left, let's look under posterior probability-based rules. 0.42 for detect artifacts. At the bottom, we got 0.57 for UAPs, essentially. In the middle, we got the other civilization centers or beacons, etc. And those numbers are pure guesses, just illustrative bookmark, as I called it. I have no idea what the cost would be and whatever. So they're just there. For the top ones, we'll probably use telescopes and radio telescopes, potentially other things. At the bottom, for UAPs, we just look at databases. Potentially, there could be other technologies we could use to improve our detection ability. but fundamentally, we have the data in databases. And so if you look at the cost estimates for telescopes, and I just dug out numbers from for telescopes from an example of the Keck telescope, the 10-meter telescope. It costs $60,000 a day to observe from it. The Arecibo radio telescope, out of a 30 million annual budget, so like 36,000 a day. For our databases, essentially, I do put in AWS, the Amazon Cloud Services, and that could be obviously other possibilities, but AWS would cost like $3 a day. Of course, it depends on the size of the database and all kind of, and I didn't factor in people because people will be the same for all of these. So I labeled all of these for A, B, C, D, E. Next. So here is the final plot. Essentially, if I put these the labels according to cost of probability, we find we have an area of high cost, low probability, which you don't like, of course, low cost, low probability, where I have the C's and D's. Again, they are just sort of bookmarks. They're not, there are approaches that will land there, but not that I'm really studied. And of course, then A and B would be what SETI essentially proposes to do typically, and they will be high cost and high probability, perhaps, except for so they haven't been very lucky in terms of signals, but and of course the UAP work will be extremely low cost and high probability because we're already seeing them. So the question again, the question is whether it would be proving extraterrestrial intelligence or some other phenomenon. So that's the kind of scatter plot that I would expect some research agency would want to look at for different for different technologies and approaches, and to make a rational decision where to invest money. And that is essentially the message. Again, I will reiterate that the numbers are not the point. You can put in your own numbers. I have a feeling, and of course I'm biased, like we all are in this conference, that the UAP work has such margins that it would always be, I cannot imagine any numbers that would not make it fall into the low cost, high probability area. But again, there is a rational approach to this, and that's what I'm advocating. Next. So, okay, I proposed an approach to a research portfolio based on statistical estimates of success and technology costs. This is based on Bayes analysis, which I hope I did correctly. And if I didn't, I will welcome corrections and help. The numbers are educated guesses, just to illustrate the portfolio approach. An actionable portfolio will require a more rigorous analysis of goals, costs, and probabilities for sure. And of course, the final expected result, and preaching to the choir here, of course, UAP research fall within low cost, high probability category. With that, I'll be glad to entertain questions.
Okay, well, we are back, and thank you for that. I think that based upon what you've shared with us, it would be best if they just transfer the money from SETI over to SCU. So anyway, thank you for making our case.
I totally agree with that.
Okay, well, yeah, there you go. I think that we should just make the money come over to SCU, and we'll be able to solve this for them. So let's get into the questions we got. If you haven't put in questions, folks, go and make sure you're in the correct session. It's the cost benefit analysis session, and put your comments there, your questions. I have the first one. I've got, please comment on Senator Nelson's comments that he is directing the science officers, Dr. Z, to conduct research into UAP yesterday on CNN, and commented that he had received briefings on as a Senate Armed Services Committee as a member. So it sounds to me like that they're directing science officers to conduct research. Do you have any comments about that?
Well, my comment is about time. And one thing I wanted to say in the past, often people blame NASA for not becoming involved. The fact is NASA was involved from the very start with SETI. And within a year of taking it on as a project, they were told to divest themselves of it. That NASA should not essentially waste time on any kind of research about the little green man. Those were apparently were the words of one of the congressmen or senators. I'm not sure, but there has always been a tremendous pressure from Congress for NASA not to become involved. And I can say from being within it that, first of all, there is a belief in everybody that life is possible on other extraterrestrial planet. That's the research what was done at NASA. They're looking for life. If they're life, chances of having intelligence are very high. So the stumbling block has always been that of the possibility of travel. But even that, I think my colleagues have been very open. I'm not sure if anybody of you knows Dick Haynes. He was a colleague of mine, and he started at NASA working, being a debunker essentially for you. But he started interviewing looking at evidence presented from pilots, realizing that they are the ones that are less likely to want to mention these things because their career is at stake, and basically turned around about the strength of the evidence. I must also say that even as of last year, Congress, and I won't make any name, but staffers were sent to Ames to make sure that NASA had not spent any money on my paper or the conference. They really, so just a year ago, I had to explain that yes, it had only been my time, and NASA had not spent any money on it. And so that's how bad it really was in terms of pressure from Congress. Now, the fact that it's been turned around, I'm very, very happy again, about time.
Well, I agree with you there, and I know that NARCAP that Dick Haynes was in is a partner to SCU, so I just wanted to share that with you. How much probability would you give to the possibility that we live in a simulation?
Oh, great.
You're kind of like freezing up there, Dr.
Oh God.
Yeah, you're freezing up.
When was I'm sorry. Somebody was commenting on Rich vanishing when he walked behind because of his filter. When it went because of you creating the background, then it made me think maybe UAPs are just happening the same way because we're in this gigantic simulation. And that's kind of indication of the weaknesses of the simulation. No, in my gut, I don't believe it. Essentially, so I can say. I've worked a lot in simulation, and one can never say never of all of these things, but I would consider it a very low probability. I do think, I'm pretty sure that I don't know. It's maybe just a gut feeling, but I don't think so.
Dr. Colombano, Larry Lemke, who worked at NASA's Ames research, took an active interest in UAPs. Are you familiar with any NASA scientists who openly or privately have proactively looked into that topic?
Yeah, I know Larry actually, and I cannot think of names right now, but I can say that at that meeting at SETI that became infamous for me, there were other NASA scientists. I took the whole blame. I mean, somebody mentioned one of the earlier talks about I forget his name now, but Ted Langley. Yeah, there had been. Well, another thing I must say that even at NASA, within just about maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we had a conference on interstellar travel. So even that idea was considered seriously by NASA, but seriously enough to contemplate ideas, on propulsions and sources of energy, etc. So then we did that at NASA.
As a former NASA scientist, what is your opinion of Dr. Avi Loeb's hypothesis that Oumuamua was an interstellar object of artificial origin?
I don't know enough trying to comment on that. I mean, it does look like. I mean, I certainly agree that it came from interstellar space. That's proven physically. Whether it's enough of a strange object to be viewed as a sign of technology per se, I just am not qualified to comment on it. It's worth looking into, I suppose, but
Sure. In your paper, New Assumptions to Guide SETI Research, you proposed that nano-sized super intelligent ETs as tech artifacts or life forms may have already visited us, but we haven't detected them. How did you incorporate this particular typology into your detection probability scenarios?
I did not. No, I basically stuck with the idea of UAPs, and right, I did not. That one was really wild speculation, in the sense that again, one of my arguments of what was actually was made by I'm sorry, I forget Reali earlier, about the impossible or unlikelihood of communication if you are like beyond 1,000 years from each other, and if we go beyond 1,000, 2,000, millions of years, billions of years, and possibilities, looking at where we are with computer technology now, it becomes so incredibly unfathomable what might be possible technologically at that level, both in terms of creating artificial intelligence, I can't say the word, making it very small, miniaturizing it, and potentially sending it at the speed of light almost, through it, pushing it through with a laser beam or something. Again, I'm trying to bring up the idea that we do not need, for probes, if you're thinking of probes, we do not need something very massive that could be very smart. So it was just in the realm of possibilities that we should allow, yeah, clearly something that small would not be easily detectable, or there will be other considerations around that. But I didn't consider it.
All right. What role does risk threat evaluation play in the cost-benefit analysis? For example, the disbenefit of not studying a phenomena when those behind it later prove to be hostile.
Oh, that's an interesting question. I did not consider it, but that's something that probably some agency like the Army or DoD might want to look at. It could be an additional argument, actually. It could be an additional argument in terms of understanding the intention. People have been talking about one thing is to detect ability, and the other is to detect intention. I did not consider that in any analysis, no.
Okay. Proving the existence of ATC, which I think is probably another technological civilization, could indeed be a low-cost proposal by obtaining their willing participation through psychic contact means so that they can provide evidence of their craft to scientists and scientific instruments. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would agree that it would be low cost if that were possible. I'm unable to comment on psychic phenomena. I'm really not an expert there.
Correct. All right. Would a more cost-effective approach to search for objects be better to search right here on Earth? Perhaps concentrate research efforts on the experiencers or people who have had regular encounters in a cheap source of data it's a cheap source of data that's available right here on Earth. Like Robert Bigelow said, why go looking in space for ET when they are right here?
Well, that by saying UAP and 0.6, I bunched that all together essentially, as being here is much cheaper. Now, if we're looking at data, essentially, the data is both about what we saw in space. There's showing data about abductions and people encounters and reports. And all I can say about that that's something that's probably again cheaper than looking elsewhere, and that should be taken seriously too. I also feel that in science you kind of go for the low-hanging fruit, and we have had such hard time becoming accepted that if we grab the low-hanging fruit of things we can actually see, prove with radars and observations and videos, and where there is no question about the reality of what we are seeing, it's a low-hanging fruit that we should be looking at first, partly to gain acceptability. Now, there is definitely ways of establishing the reality of less physical type of phenomena just based on reports, and potentially psychic phenomena as well. There are other ways of approaching those as well, with different types of science, and I think they are equally legitimate and should be addressed. But again, from our point of view here, I think we go for the lower-hanging fruit and try to there is enough stuff there to keep us busy for a long time to prove things. And yes, meanwhile, let's continue gathering data. And if we can find a way to approach these other phenomena in a way that's scientific, let's do it.
The recent announcement about NASA starting to engage in a study, what do you think NASA is likely to do in terms of any concrete actions? Again, if NASA gets the go-ahead from Congress, they will do it. They'll be very happy, and they may well re-engage with SETI or create a different program. There are enough people in NASA will be interested. But for us, again, we on one hand,
the NASA itself has its own portfolio ideas, and I'm assuming just the fact that we have spent so much time in interested in finding life on in this solar system. The idea of finding intelligence would be even more interesting, and whatever approaches would seem scientific, I'm sure NASA would want to take them, but they have to get the go ahead.
Based on your background, do you have any intuitive sense of whether or not we're going to encounter any biological or tech-based combined or sentient beings that are indistinguishable as tech or bio? Do you suspect that there are biologically based craft that we are seeing in the seemingly credible reports?
Well, I do believe that we're not the apex. I agree totally with what's mentioned many times by Matt and other people, the kind of mediocrity assumption, and we're agreed that we're on a continuing evolution. So, and what we will look like, and they're basically, quite frankly, I see our branching off in this. I'm totally speculative, but in two different areas. One in which we begin to incorporate technology in our own body, as we were doing already, replacing parts and potentially putting extra chips in our brain, so we will have our cell phone already implanted. We'll become cyborgs essentially. I think that's actually, I consider it quite likely. And another branch where basically robotics and AI, take off as a different species essentially. And just the very fact that they don't have the limitation of a skull size that has to develop over millions of years, so they can just take up the size they need, and then the question is, what kind of interspecies communication and agreement or symbiosis will we have? So the more we go into the future, I'd say that the less likely we are to have somebody stepping out of a spacecraft and looking like us. But both in terms of evolution being different elsewhere, and although there are commonalities, there are certain ways in which there are advantages to organisms that are very common. Like every organism has developed eyes and some kind of legs, and so we might not be all that far off, even with. But yeah, the further up we are, the more likely that there's something that we could recognize intelligence will be quite foreign, quite mysterious and magic, and not looking like us.
All right.
That's speculation.
Of course. Do you have any thoughts on Stephen Wolfram's proposal of a universal programming language to communicate with ETs? If you saw the movie Arrival, an ET, Wolfram played a part in that.
Right. I often ask myself, even years ago when I was a kid, if somebody stepped out of a spacecraft and I was trying to communicate, and what would I do? And I thought, okay, I think I would draw the Pythagorean theorem on sand. I would just put a stick, that would, like, geometry would seem to be a visible and possible common language of an understanding that we're thinking, we're rational, both of us, and I would say that a computer program would probably do the same thing. And I like that idea. I like that idea.
Did you happen to know Hal Povenmire? I guess he worked at NASA during the Blue Book days with Dr. Hynek. I'm just curious.
No, I
There's
don't.
Hal Povenmire.
I don't know. I know.
Okay, all right. In your personal opinion, what do you believe UAPs are?
You're putting me on the spot, aren't you?
Sorry, these are questions I'm getting. Anyway.
Well, I mean, yeah, I do believe they're the sign of technology, and again, whether it's essentially autonomous intelligence, whether it carries beings or something, I just don't. I really can't even speculate. But yeah, I think there are signs of some extraterrestrial technology, and I frankly haven't given thought to the possibility of time travel for the various reasons that have been mentioned before. Again, still being open, but if I were to put my bets on something, I would say yeah, this is definitely a sign of a technology.
I just want to acknowledge that you're doing a great job of tap dancing, which is what I would be doing with some of these questions. Anyway, okay, so
I do tango instead of.
You do the tango. Well, there you go. Well, we're looking forward to it. Can you comment on creating a project to distinguish the infrared energy signatures of UAP and to compare them to those of conventional and stealth aircraft? I suspect that the NRO has probably already done this.
I know I'm not an expert in that. I can't comment on the technology specifically.
Right. All right. We're going right down the line. Let's see. Do you believe that UAPs have traveled great distances to get here, or they have underwater bases?
You know, the underwater thing has struck me as very interesting because there is a lot of water in space. You know, there are the equivalent of several oceans in our own solar system, whether or not it's liquid water or whether it's water under streets of ice and whatever. There is lots of water here. I expect there's lots of water on other planets. And in some ways, water provides a common element for potential beings. So if they could develop their abilities or the technology to be underwater on their planet, they can come here and be underwater here and find themselves essentially in the same element. So I would consider the idea of them using water as a kind of a common medium is very interesting. It would make a lot of sense to me that they would use water as a potential again medium to hide, to subsist, to maneuver in. Yeah, I would think so.
Very much agree with you. Would you consider as valid to include OO parts, which are out of time parts, like such as nanosprings found in Russia, in the detection in this study, as being artifacts of potential advanced civilizations? Are you familiar with out of time parts?
No, I'm not.
Nanosprings? Okay.
So
Let's move on. Since we're talking about really exotic physics, how much of a role will the Department of Energy with its national labs play? I didn't know that you're.
well, I would hope I would hope they will play a larger role, you know.
Sure.
And well, again, sometimes the Department of Energy and Department of Defense, DoD, have been actually freer to do stuff than NASA has because they have had the ability to basically have like programs, and you know, and with the excuse during college, but it's real of defense, they can do a lot of stuff that Congress has no direct visibility and control over, which has not been true for NASA because officially NASA's programs have always been public essentially. So there, it is. Yeah, I would be. They should be very interested, basically. Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, that's all of the questions that I have. In terms of, I think the rest of them have been pretty much covered. I don't see any further ones, but I want to thank you for being a part of the conference and also your participation in this and also your participation in SCU. It's been great to have you on board. I'm glad that we were able to get you back. And thank you just for all of your work. I think a lot of people are interested in NASA and what they're going to do. And of course, you had your experience there and stuff like that. And I think that the other part of that I just want to share is that, you know, it's sad, very sad for me to hear all of the pushback that you did receive from an agency when you were doing science, if you would. And that's very unfortunate. I think that you heard quite a different story, even from some of the other presenters. That even like Dr. Michael Masters was able to say that in his university, he's being encouraged to present, and that they're actually, I mean, that's very supportive of those kind of discussions. And it's too bad that we can't see that same thing when you were in NASA.
Well, again, I want to point out that I was supported by my own management and,
Oh, okay.
All right. My
good to know.
Division. No, it wasn't. Nobody objected to what I said. They just basically asked me. They let me know of the pressure above and how it would be if I could please not pursue that while I was there for a while. But it wasn't because they felt that what I said was unreasonable. They even said, "Oh, I agree with all this," you know.
Oh, okay.
But our hands are tied, kind of thing, you know. That's sort of, But I want to acknowledge that part too.
Okay, well, thank you again. And I'm going to now conclude this session. I'm going to stop the recording.